The strings had just begun to swell when the noise shattered everything. The rhythmic harmony of violins was sliced in half by the mechanical roar of a helicopter, echoing off the marble pillars of the Maddox estate. Guests gasped and shielded their eyes, gowns rustling and tuxedos shifting uneasily as the black helicopter descended onto the garden helipad. At the altar, Thomas Maddox froze. His fiancée, Vanessa, squeezed his arm, her diamond bracelet digging into his skin. "What the hell is that?" she whispered, her voice tense, but Thomas couldn't answer. He was staring at the helicopter door as it opened. Out stepped a woman in a navy blue suit, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. Her hair, once familiar to him, blew lightly in the wind. Then 2 children emerged behind her, a boy and a girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, each holding one of her hands. The murmurs began at once, a low hum turning into a wave of disbelief. Guests craned their necks. Thomas's mother rose to her feet, her voice trembling. "Oh my God! Look at their eyes! Look at his eyes!" The children stared straight ahead with calm, collected expressions, and in them, Thomas saw himself. 6 years earlier, Claire and Thomas had been the golden couple of Boston's elite. He, the heir to Maddox Pharmaceuticals, known for his strategic brilliance. She, a groundbreaking immunologist whose cancer research had been praised in journals and political circles alike. They married under those same arches, surrounded by the same curated roses and imported string players. Their wedding was the event of the year, their union seemingly perfect, but behind closed doors, cracks had started to form. Nothing visible, nothing public. Not until Julian, Thomas's lifelong friend and CFO of Maddox Pharmaceuticals, introduced his younger sister Vanessa into their social circle, and not until the Whisper campaign began. One rainy evening, Claire stood barefoot on the marble stairs of the Maddox mansion, shaking, soaked to the skin, with her arms wrapped around herself. In the darkness, 2 security guards flanked her. Behind her, the heavy front door closed with a final, echoing click. Hours earlier, she had been Thomas's wife. Now, she was nothing more than a name to be scrubbed from the estate's records. "I didn't send those messages," she had pleaded, tears streaking down her face. "That isn't my perfume. I've never met anyone named Michael." Thomas hadn't even raised his voice. That had been the worst part. He had simply looked at her with cold, bitter eyes and said, "Get out." She had reached for him, desperate, confused. And that's when Julian appeared, handing Thomas a hotel key and a man's watch. Security found these in her car. Claire hadn't even seen them before. And in less than 30 minutes, her life unraveled. Her credit cards were frozen, her access to Maddox Labs revoked, her email locked. Her reputation, the pride of a decade-long career, shattered like glass. By midnight, she was sleeping in her car in a Walmart parking lot, 6 weeks pregnant and completely alone. She didn't know it yet, but that night was not the end. It was only the beginning. The next morning, after vomiting again into a pharmacy restroom, Claire stared at the positive result on the pregnancy test. Her fingers trembled. Her heart was broken, but something new flickered inside her. Resolve. At 7 weeks, she tried to tell Thomas. She waited outside his building, begged the security guard, "Please, just tell him, I'm pregnant." 10 minutes later, the guard returned. "Mr. Maddox says, given your infidelity, he has no reason to believe the child is his." Claire nearly collapsed. From a distance, she saw Julian watching through the glass doors. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. That morning, Claire drove until her tank ran dry, until she couldn't cry anymore. She had lost everything. Her home, her career, her husband. And yet, inside her, 2 lives had begun. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. From that moment on, the story changed, and it all led back to this day, the wedding, the helicopter, and the woman who stepped out of the sky. Claire Maddox had returned, and she hadn't come alone. Claire's world had collapsed in a single night, yet life inside her had only just begun. Sitting beneath the cold fluorescent lights of the 24-hour pharmacy parking lot, Claire clutched the positive pregnancy test in her trembling hand. The disbelief still hadn't passed, not from Thomas throwing her out, not from the cruel text messages, the fake affair, or the planted evidence. But this was real, a heartbeat, two tiny lives forming inside her, unaware of the storm they had been conceived in. She didn't know where she would sleep that night, or tomorrow, or next week, but she knew one thing for certain: she would protect them. By morning, Claire's email access had been permanently revoked. Her building keycard no longer worked. Her entire professional life had vanished like smoke. Each friend she called responded with awkward silence, or not at all. Every one of them tied socially to Thomas. 1 week after her exile, she collapsed from dehydration in a gas station restroom. That's when Eleanor Simmons entered her life. "You're either pregnant or dying," the elderly woman said with startling frankness as she crouched beside Claire. "Either way, you shouldn't be alone." Eleanor was a retired librarian who had lost her only daughter to cancer years ago. She brought Claire home, gave her soup, and offered her daughter's old bedroom until you figure things out. That small act of kindness became a turning point. For the first time in days, Claire slept in a real bed. The next morning, she pawned her wedding ring, worth over $300,000, for a fraction of its value, $112,000, just enough to cover prenatal care, food, and a used laptop. Then she began to fight back. Meticulously, Claire started building timelines, piecing together the sequence of events, the evidence, the manipulations. She dug into phone records, company data she'd backed up, and the inconsistencies in the stories Julian had fed Thomas. The truth came into focus. Julian had orchestrated it all, and his sister, Vanessa, had been complicit. But why? What did they stand to gain? Claire didn't have to wait long for the answer. One afternoon, while scrolling job postings at a coffee shop, she overheard two pharmaceutical researchers whispering over a laptop. "The trial data doesn't match the submission," one said. "Side effects were altered," the other replied. "Julian Maddox signed off. I bet Thomas never even saw the originals." Claire froze. The cancer protocol trials, her trials, had been tampered with. If the data was falsified, it wasn't just fraud. It was dangerous. People's lives were at stake. And if she had remained at Maddox Pharmaceuticals, she might have uncovered it. That's why she had to be removed. That night, cradling her growing belly, Claire whispered into the silence, "Your father didn't want us, but that's okay, because we're going to build something so beautiful. He'll regret everything he ever threw away." But survival came first. At 4 months pregnant, Claire applied for over 30 research jobs. At every interview, she received the same rehearsed rejections. "Your credentials are excellent, but we've already filled the position. Unfortunately, we're looking for someone with more recent experience." It didn't take long for her to realize someone was blacklisting her. Julian. She found herself crying on Eleanor's porch swing. "No one will hire me. He's poisoned the entire industry against me." Eleanor placed a warm hand over hers. "Then maybe, dear, it's time to meet people who've never heard of Julian Maddox." The next morning, Eleanor drove her to a small community clinic serving mostly low-income patients. "My friend, Dr. Rebecca Torres, runs this place," Eleanor said. "She doesn't care about status, only about whether you can help." Dr. Torres was a force of nature. Within 5 minutes of meeting Claire and hearing her research background, she offered her a part-time job analyzing patient outcomes. "I can't pay you what you're worth," Dr. Torres warned. "And I see you're carrying twins." Claire blinked. "You can tell?" "Textbook twin pregnancy," Torres said. "Wide set, higher posture, and you're always nauseous." For the first time in months, Claire smiled. "When can I start?" Working at the clinic wasn't glamorous. The floors were worn, the equipment outdated, and the staff overworked. But it was honest, and no one cared that Claire was pregnant, unmarried, or blacklisted. She filed patient records by hand, analyzed treatment outcomes late into the night, and cleaned up when the janitor couldn't make it. But it kept her mind sharp. It kept her focused. And then came the pattern. At 7 months pregnant, Claire waddled into Dr. Torres's office with a stack of charts and a question she could no longer ignore. "There's something wrong." Claire said, spreading data sheets across the desk. Look at these liver enzymes. The patients taking Maddox Pharmaceuticals' new cancer drug are showing liver damage at 3 times the rate reported in the trials. Dr. Torres's expression darkened. Are you sure? It's a small sample, Claire admitted, but the pattern is clear, and it matches what I overheard in the coffee shop weeks ago. Those trials were falsified. Torres stared at the numbers. This could kill people, Claire nodded. And no one will listen to me. They think I'm bitter, disgraced, pregnant, and unstable. Torres tapped her pen on the desk. Then we won't go to them, she said. We'll build something of our own. Claire blinked. I'm sorry? We develop an alternative, a safer, better treatment. We get the data ourselves. That would take years, Claire said. Millions in funding. Not necessarily, Torres replied, eyes gleaming. Come, let me show you something. What Dr. Torres showed Claire was a revelation. Behind her farmhouse, nestled inside a converted barn, was a fully functional research lab, better equipped than half the university labs Claire had ever worked in. My late husband left me quite comfortable, Torres said with a dry smile. I fund research no one else will touch. Rare diseases, orphan medications, treatments that aren't profitable enough. Claire ran her hand over a gleaming microscope. This is extraordinary. It's also private, Torres said firmly. No shareholders, no deadlines, no shortcuts, just science. She turned to Claire. Your cancer protocol, before Julian hijacked it, it was revolutionary. What could you do if no one stood in your way? Claire stared at her. The question wasn't theoretical. Not anymore. 2 weeks later, Claire gave birth to twins, Leo and Lily, right there at the clinic with Dr. Torres by her side and Eleanor holding her hand. No reporters, no hospital press releases, no family name to announce them. But in that quiet, clean room, a boy with his father's serious eyes and a girl with her mother's fire entered the world. Claire held them to her chest and whispered, "You will never be erased." Recovery was hard. She was exhausted, stitched, and bleeding, but she allowed herself only 2 weeks before returning to the lab, often with the twins sleeping in a portable crib next to the centrifuge. As weeks turned to months, Claire worked through pain, night feeds, and bouts of crushing doubt. But the research kept growing. At 8 months, the breakthrough came. She developed a compound with astonishing efficacy against aggressive cancers, with almost no side effects. It was everything Maddox Pharmaceuticals had promised with their drug, but failed to deliver. Dr. Torres was ecstatic. This could change everything, she said, staring at the test results. You need to patent this. Patents take money, Claire reminded her, and lawyers. I have both, Torres replied. But more importantly, this discovery deserves a company, a clean one that will never sell out. Claire laughed bitterly. What company would want to work with Thomas Maddox's discarded wife? Torres looked at her, deadly serious. No company will, she said. You'll have to build one. The name came to her one night as she rocked the twins to sleep under the soft light of the nursery. Phoenix, not just a bird reborn from ashes, but a symbol of reclaiming everything once burned and broken. Phoenix Pharmaceuticals was born in the back of a converted barn with 2 scientists, 2 babies, and an unshakable will. Claire chose to register the company under her maiden name, Claire Whitmore, not to hide, but to make a point. This company had nothing to do with the Maddox legacy. No part of it belonged to Thomas or Julian. This would be built her way, from the ground up. With Dr. Torres's seed funding and her own tireless work, Claire filed for the first patent, a safer, more effective cancer treatment with minimal side effects. The paperwork went through without delay. No red flags, no Maddox lawyers circling, because no one, not even Julian, had connected Claire Whitmore to Claire Maddox. The first year was brutal. Claire breastfed during virtual meetings, coded chemical formulas while rocking a crib with her foot, and collapsed from exhaustion more than once. But progress was steady. At 2 years old, the twins were walking, talking, and exploring the world with wide, curious eyes. And Phoenix had just cleared its first FDA approval. The drug's name was Arlenox, a nod to Claire's late father, Arlen Whitmore, the man who once told her, "Science without conscience is just another kind of destruction." Hospitals took notice, especially those already suffering from the failures of Maddox Pharmaceuticals' expensive and side-effect-heavy cancer medication. When Mercy Health Network, a major hospital system, signed a multi-million-dollar contract with Phoenix, the entire industry blinked. An unknown biotech startup had just beaten a legacy giant. Claire's name wasn't in the headlines. Just Dr. Claire Whitmore, founder and chief scientist. No one connected her to her former husband. Not yet. But inside Phoenix's modest headquarters, she held Leo and Lily's hands as she reviewed the latest financial projections. "We did it," she whispered. The children looked up, smiling. They didn't understand corporate victory, but they saw their mother's pride, and that was enough. At Maddox Pharmaceuticals, Julian tossed the report onto Thomas's desk in rage. "We just lost Mercy. $30 million in annual revenue. Gone." Thomas, now more a public face than a hands-on CEO, barely looked up. "Then offer them a better deal." "I did," Julian snapped. "They refused. Said Phoenix's drug works better, fewer side effects, half the cost." Thomas finally looked up, frowning. "Who's behind it?" "Dr. Claire Whitmore, private, no interviews, came out of nowhere 3 years ago." Thomas tapped the name. Something about it felt familiar, but slipped through his fingers. "I want to meet her," he said. "Set up a dinner. Maybe we can buy her out." Julian hesitated. "She rarely agrees to meetings, especially with big firms." Thomas smirked. "Everyone has their price." He had no idea he was about to face a woman who couldn't be bought because everything she valued he'd already thrown away. Meanwhile, across the city, Claire glanced at a business magazine on her desk. The cover showed Thomas and Vanessa at a charity gala. The headline, "Heir to Maddox Fortune set to marry longtime family friend." Claire's eyes didn't even twitch. Not anymore. Behind her, Leo and Lily colored at their tiny desk, their drawings a blur of stars, animals, and stick figure families. They had never once asked about their father. But Claire had prepared a small memory box filled with photos, articles, and keepsakes. Not for bitterness, for truth. So one day, when they were ready, they would know who he was and what he had chosen to lose. The Maddox estate had never looked more magnificent. Thousands of white roses adorned the garden, where 300 guests gathered to witness the wedding of Thomas Maddox and Vanessa Blake. A gentle breeze carried the notes of a string quartet across the lawn, while waitstaff in black and white moved like clockwork. In the front row, Thomas's parents exchanged stiff glances. They had never truly embraced Vanessa, but tradition demanded appearances. Julian, standing proudly as best man, surveyed the ceremony with the smug satisfaction of a man who believed everything was finally under control. At the altar, Thomas stood in a tailored tuxedo, trying to hide the restlessness beneath his polished exterior. His life was set, a powerful company, a respectable marriage, a clean past, or so he thought. Because just as the wedding officiant opened his mouth to speak, a distant hum sliced through the air. It grew louder, mechanical, rhythmic. A helicopter. At first, guests assumed it was a dramatic wedding stunt, perhaps a surprise entrance or a showy honeymoon reveal. They turned in their seats, smiling, curious. Then they saw Thomas's face. He had gone pale. The black helicopter descended onto the estate's helipad with surgical precision. Security began to move, uncertain whether to intervene. No one had scheduled this arrival. The door opened, and Claire Whitmore stepped out. Even after 6 years, Thomas recognized her instantly. Her posture was stronger, her eyes sharper, but it was her. The woman he had thrown out of his life without hesitation or mercy. Then came the children, a boy and a girl, dressed immaculately, holding each of her hands. They moved with confidence, like this was a stage they'd rehearsed for. Guests began whispering. Thomas's mother gasped aloud. "Richard, look at them," she said to her husband. "They have Thomas's eyes." Vanessa reached for Thomas's arm. Who is that woman? And why is she here with children? Thomas couldn't answer. Julian moved, signaling for security to remove them. But before anyone could act, Claire's voice rang out. calm, precise, and unmistakably powerful. "I wouldn't do that, Julian," she said. "Not unless you want your financial records on the front page tomorrow morning." He froze. Claire continued forward, the children by her side, until she stood at the edge of the seating area. All eyes were on her. "Thomas," she said, loud enough for the entire garden to hear, "meet your children, Leo and Lily, the ones you never knew existed because you threw me out 6 years ago." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Vanessa looked at Thomas in horror. "She's lying, right? Tell them she's lying." But Thomas said nothing. He was staring at the children, at the boy whose serious eyes mirrored his own, at the girl who stood with her arms crossed just like he used to as a child. Claire pulled documents from her bag. "DNA confirmation has already been filed with family court," she said, "along with evidence that Julian and Vanessa conspired to remove me from your life." Julian snapped. "This is insane! Security, get her out of—" "Stop," came another voice. A woman emerged from behind Claire, holding a leather folder. Dr. Rebecca Torres. "I wouldn't suggest interference," she said smoothly. "Not unless Maddox Pharmaceuticals wants the FDA to receive our full report on your falsified clinical trials tonight instead of next week." The guests erupted in a wave of murmurs. Thomas's parents pushed forward. His mother knelt, despite her expensive gown, to look the children in the eye. "Hello," she said, voice trembling. I would be your grandmother." Lily, always the bolder twin, tilted her head. "You look like the pictures in our memory box." The room seemed to tilt. Thomas could barely breathe. Claire looked at him, not with anger, but with a quiet finality. "I tried to tell you," she said. "I was 7 weeks pregnant when you threw me out. Your security guards delivered the message. You told them you wanted a paternity test after the birth, but no one ever contacted me." Thomas turned to Julian, panic dawning. "I never received anything, no message, no pregnancy." "She's lying," Julian hissed. But it was too late. The truth had landed, hard, public, and undeniable, and it was only the beginning. Julian lunged forward again, eyes wild. "This is a setup, a public stunt to humiliate us." But Dr. Torres didn't flinch. She handed a folder to the nearest journalist hovering at the edge of the crowd. "Inside, you'll find initial evidence of falsified reports, offshore accounts, and embezzlement tied directly to Julian Maddox and Vanessa Blake." A collective gasp rose like a wave. Then came the final blow. From the back of the garden, 2 figures in dark suits approached, flashing federal badges. "Julian Maddox? Vanessa Blake?" one agent said. "We have questions regarding financial fraud, corporate misconduct, and regulatory violations. You'll need to come with us." "No, wait! This is insane!" Vanessa shrieked. "Thomas, do something!" But Thomas couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't speak. Security didn't need further instruction. Julian and Vanessa were escorted, protesting and red-faced, from the ceremony. Silence fell. Not awkward, not confused, but reverent, as if everyone knew they'd just witnessed history. Thomas's parents turned to Claire, their eyes brimming. "May we?" his mother asked, looking at the children again. Claire nodded softly. Leo hesitated, still half hiding behind his mother, but Lily stepped forward, bold and curious, and took her grandmother's hand. "You're real," she said. "You are too," Thomas's mother whispered, her voice cracking. For the first time, Thomas moved. He dropped to his knees in front of the twins, slowly, as if afraid they'd vanish. "Hi," he said quietly. I'm Thomas. I'm—" "Dad," Lily said, testing the word. Then she added, "But we don't have to call you that if we're not ready." Thomas's eyes welled with tears. "That's okay. You can call me whatever you want." Claire stood back, watching. Her face was unreadable, but her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the folder still in her arms. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere private," she said gently. "Your parents are welcome to join." Thomas nodded numbly. The remaining guests, now mostly gossiping among themselves, watched as Claire and the twins walked toward the helicopter. Thomas followed. His parents followed. Their departure was slow, surreal. "Why now?" he asked once they were aboard, his voice barely audible over the rotors. After all these years, why today? Claire didn't look at him. Because they deserve to know their father. Because your parents deserve to know their grandchildren. And because Julian and Vanessa were about to steal everything you still had, leaving you bankrupt, disgraced, and potentially liable for a scandal you never even knew about. She paused, then added with a bitter smile. And because scheduling your wedding on the exact anniversary of the night you threw me out, well, I thought a little poetic symmetry was overdue. Thomas had no answer. The helicopter landed atop a sleek building bearing the Phoenix Pharmaceuticals logo. As they stepped into the penthouse apartment, Thomas realized, with rising disbelief, that Claire had built more than a company. She had built an empire. Inside, the twins showed him their room, half space-themed for Lily, half filled with books and rock collections for Leo. Photos lined the hallway, birthdays, school plays, science fairs. Thomas wasn't in any of them, but his image was. His wedding photo with Claire. A baby photo he never remembered taking. Clippings of old articles about him. In the corner of their shared room was a small box labeled Dad. Lily opened it proudly. Mom said you were smart. That's why we are too. Thomas looked up at Claire, astonished. Despite everything, she had preserved his place in their lives, at least in memory. I'll give you some time, Claire said. Then we need to talk. There are things you need to see. He nodded, too overwhelmed to respond. In the living room, Thomas's parents sat like statues, cradling teacups they hadn't touched. Richard Maddox, a titan in the industry, looked utterly defeated. How could we not have known? He asked. Claire didn't sugarcoat it. Julian intercepted everything. Emails, calls, messages. He forged documents and made sure Thomas received only what supported their lies. But why? Thomas's mother whispered. Why would he do all this? Claire opened her laptop. For power, she said. He and Vanessa had been siphoning money for years while pushing Thomas toward disgrace. If they'd married, Vanessa would have had access to his holdings. Within months, they planned to take control of Maddox Pharmaceuticals entirely. Thomas entered the room just as she turned the screen. He stared at the evidence. Payment trails, forged signatures, falsified drug reports. It was overwhelming. My God, he whispered. I never wanted revenge, Claire said. I wanted safety. For the children. For your patients. I didn't destroy Maddox Pharmaceuticals, Thomas. You handed it to people who did. Thomas sat down heavily, the truth unraveling in front of him like threads pulled from a finely tailored suit. His hands shook slightly as he held a printed page showing a payment from Julian's private account, paid to a man who had posed as Claire's fictitious lover. I remember this man, Thomas said, voice hollow. He showed up at my gym one morning, said he knew you. He mentioned our bedroom. Claire's tone was steady. He was paid to say those things, just as the restraining order you supposedly filed against me was forged. Julian even had a legal team stage witness statements. You never questioned them. Thomas clenched his jaw. I trusted him. He was my brother. No, Claire replied gently but firmly. He used to be your brother, the man who did this to me, to the children, to your company. He was someone else entirely. There was a long silence, broken only by the distant laughter of the twins playing in their room. Claire looked toward the hallway, then back at Thomas. I could have gone public with this years ago. I had enough evidence after Leo and Lily turned 2, but I didn't. Because if I had, the entire company would have collapsed, and I wasn't willing to destroy thousands of employees' livelihoods just to prove a point. Thomas's parents looked at her, their expressions a mixture of awe and shame. You protected the company, Richard said, almost disbelieving. After everything we did to you. I protected what mattered most, Claire said simply. And now I have a proposal. She handed Thomas a folder, a merger document between Maddox Pharmaceuticals and Phoenix. It's the only way forward, she continued. This will preserve jobs, stabilize your stock, and allow for legal and regulatory restructuring while the dust settles. Thomas opened it, reading through the terms. You've prepared for everything. I've had 6 years, Claire replied. He looked up at her. And after this? What happens to us? Claire didn't hesitate. There is no us, Thomas. That part ended the night you chose Julian's lies over the truth we built together. Thomas's shoulders slumped. But we share children. We built lives, memories. We share co-parenting, Claire corrected. You are their father, and if you want to earn their love, you'll have to show up for them now. Not in grand gestures, but in bedtime stories, parent-teacher meetings, Saturday breakfasts. The small things that matter. Dr. Torres stepped in with a tablet. Julian and Vanessa are in federal custody. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Thomas's face paled. If we present the merger quickly, we might prevent a total collapse. I can attend with your parents, Claire said. You'll need time with the twins tomorrow morning. Thomas looked at her, a shadow of gratitude in his expression. Thank you for everything, for keeping their world intact when mine fell apart. Claire didn't smile, but her voice softened. Say goodnight to them. Lily won't sleep without at least 3 bedtime stories. In the children's room, Thomas knelt beside Leo and Lily. Can I come to your birthday party next month? He asked quietly. Lily grinned. Only if you bring the right telescope. I'm having a space theme. Leo nodded. And a real geologist for my rock collection. Thomas laughed through a lump in his throat. Done. As he kissed their foreheads and tucked them in, he turned toward Claire, who watched silently from the doorway. They're incredible, he whispered. How did you do this? I had help, she replied. Dr. Torres, Eleanor, and a whole lot of sleepless nights. They stood in silence, not the tense stillness of old wounds, but something quieter. Acknowledgement, respect. Forgiveness, Claire finally said, isn't something you get all at once. It's earned day by day. I understand, Thomas said. Do you? Claire met his gaze. Because the man who threw me out would never have said that. But the man who knelt beside his children tonight, maybe he can. The emergency board meeting at Maddox Pharmaceuticals began under a storm of scrutiny. Financial news outlets had already picked up the story. Arrests, fraud, and the shocking return of Claire Whitmore. By the time Thomas and his parents arrived, most of the board members were already seated, their expressions a mix of alarm and disapproval. Thomas stood at the head of the table, his voice steady, though the exhaustion under his eyes was clear. This company has suffered a betrayal not only of ethics but of trust, he began. Julian Maddox and Vanessa Blake orchestrated an embezzlement scheme over several years, using falsified trial data and laundering through offshore accounts. But we have a path forward. He opened the merger proposal Claire had prepared and handed copies to each board member. A partnership with Phoenix Pharmaceuticals led by Dr. Claire Whitmore will allow us to stabilize our research pipeline, restore our public credibility, and protect thousands of jobs. Their products have already outperformed ours in multiple hospitals, and the FDA has fast-tracked approval of their upcoming trials. There was silence as the members skimmed the documents. One of the senior board members, Ms. Margaret Chin, raised an eyebrow. Dr. Claire Whitmore is your ex-wife? Yes, Thomas replied without flinching, and the mother of my children. Her company was built independently, ethically, and with integrity we can only hope to emulate. I failed her once. I will not fail this company by ignoring what she's accomplished. Another member leaned forward. This merger? She'll have controlling influence? She doesn't want control, Thomas said. She wants transparency, fair pricing, and she wants to make sure our patients don't pay the price for our mistakes. Ms. Chin closed the folder. She sounds like the kind of person we should have put in charge years ago. The board voted unanimously to proceed with the merger. As the news broke, Phoenix and Maddox merge in historic industry turnaround, public opinion began to shift. Claire's name, once tied to scandal, was now linked to innovation and redemption. But Claire didn't grant interviews. She refused every offer, every podcast, every primetime special. This isn't entertainment, she told her team. It's science. It's business. And for me, it's personal. In the weeks that followed, Thomas began to show up, not in headlines, but in small ways. He helped the twins build their school science fair projects. He picked them up from their weekend club and didn't just wait in the car. He came inside, spoke with their instructors, learned what they loved. Claire watched cautiously at first, but slowly she began to allow space for consistency. The twins adjusted too. Children are, by nature, resilient. Leo asked more questions. Lily asked for more stories, and in the in-between moments, they began calling him Dad without being prompted. It was Lily who asked the question that shifted everything. "Will Daddy be at our birthday party?" Claire paused before answering. "Yes," she said, "he will." The day of the birthday arrived without the chaos of past revelations, but with far more joy. The celebration took place at Thomas's new house, a modest but warm home with a large backyard. No grandeur, no press, just people who mattered. The theme, space and dinosaurs. Claire arrived early with Eleanor and Dr. Torres, both of whom had become fixtures in the twins' lives. Thomas's parents were already there, carefully helping arrange the decorations. "I can't believe he ordered real fossils," Claire murmured to Dr. Torres. "He's trying," the older woman replied, "and he's asking all the right people for help." Lily ran to Claire with a planet-shaped balloon in one hand. "Grandma made space cookies!" Claire smiled. "And did you thank her?" "Twice," Lily beamed. As the sun dipped low and the garden lights turned on, Thomas stood beside Claire on the patio, watching the children laugh. "Thank you for letting me be part of today," he said softly. "You earned it," she replied, simply. He looked at her. "Not everything we lost can be recovered, but maybe some of it can be rebuilt." Claire didn't turn to him. She kept watching the twins. "Maybe," she said, "but only if it's built for them. Not for us." As twilight bathed the backyard in soft amber, the twins danced beneath strings of lights, their laughter blending with music from a small speaker. It was a birthday unlike any they'd had before, not because of the decorations or the gifts, but because both sides of their family were present, side by side. Claire sat on a bench beneath a tree, sipping tea while observing the joyful chaos. Dr. Torres joined her with a soft chuckle. "They're thriving," she said. "It's hard to believe just a year ago they didn't even know their father." Claire nodded, her eyes following Leo as he guided Richard Maddox through his newly arranged fossil table. "Children have a way of leading the healing process, if we let them." Dr. Torres glanced toward the other end of the yard, where Thomas and David were discussing telescopes. "And what about you? You've held the entire structure together. Are you healing too?" Claire smiled faintly. "Some days, yes. Other days, it's still a process." Just then, David approached with a wrapped box and a sheepish smile. "I promised Leo I'd help him calibrate his dinosaur detection scanner," he said, "but I was hoping to steal Claire for just a moment." Dr. Torres stood, knowingly. "I'll hold down the prehistoric fort." Claire followed David to a quieter corner of the garden near the lilac trees. "I wanted to ask you something," he began. "There's a medical conference in Vienna next month, 3 days. I was planning to go alone, but I thought maybe we could turn it into a week. See the city. Breathe." Claire hesitated, surprised, not by the invitation, but by how much she wanted to say yes. "I'd have to check with Thomas about the twins' schedule," she said cautiously. "I already did," David admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "He said he'd be glad to take them that week. Dr. Torres offered to help too." Claire raised an eyebrow, amused. "You planned this." "I hoped," he corrected softly. "You've spent so long building lives for everyone else. I thought maybe it was time you had something just for you." Claire studied him for a long moment. There was no pressure in his voice, no grand gesture, just quiet support, something she hadn't realized she'd missed until now. "Vienna sounds wonderful," she said. The following morning, Thomas prepared breakfast in his kitchen as Leo and Lily animatedly recounted their favorite moments from the party. Claire arrived to pick them up, David in tow. As the adults sipped coffee and gathered school bags, an unexpected sense of rhythm unfolded. Schedules aligned, small jokes exchanged, decisions made collaboratively. When the twins ran off to grab their science kits, Thomas approached Claire. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said sincerely, "for letting me be part of their lives, for not letting bitterness win." Claire looked at him thoughtfully. "Do you know what the real turning point was?" Thomas shook his head. "It wasn't Leo and Lily. It wasn't Phoenix. It wasn't exposing Julian. It was showing you that redemption is possible. but forgiveness has to be earned." Her words held no resentment, just truth. Thomas nodded slowly. "The man who threw you out that night, he wouldn't have understood that, but I do now." Before Claire could respond, Leo called out from the hallway. "Mom! Dad! We forgot something!" The adults turned. "Our family photo," he said, pointing to the camera still on the side table. "It's tradition. After every birthday." Lily was already setting the timer. "Everyone by the lilac tree! Hurry!" They gathered in the garden. Claire, Thomas, the twins, David, Eleanor, Dr. Torres, and Thomas's parents. A strange patchwork of people brought together by betrayal, rebuilt by grace. The camera clicked, and in that instant they weren't exes, adversaries, or saviors. They were a family, imperfect but whole in their own way. That evening, after dinner and a quiet car ride home, Claire sat at the dining table while the twins worked on their homework beside her. Leo was meticulously labeling parts of a trilobite diagram, while Lily tried to explain the phases of the moon to her plush astronaut bear. It was a peaceful scene, ordinary even. But for Claire, it was the kind of ordinary she had once feared she'd never have again. Her phone chimed. A message from Thomas. "Photos ready." Attached was the picture from the garden. Everyone smiling. Leo clutching a fossil. Lily with her arms raised in triumph. Claire and Thomas seated beside them. David standing just slightly closer to her than the others. It was chaotic and imperfect, and absolutely real. Beneath the image, Thomas had written, "Not what either of us imagined, but maybe better than what we planned. Thank you for showing me that the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's creation." Claire stared at the screen for a long moment before locking it. She looked up at her children, their heads bent in concentration. The result of 6 years of perseverance, love, and carefully chosen boundaries. Then she looked across the room, where David sat, flipping through one of Leo's geology books with amused curiosity. There had been so many moments over the years when she had dreamed of vindication, of showing the world who she truly was. But now, as the chaos faded and peace took its place, she realized the truth. She didn't need to win. She needed to rebuild. And she had. Phoenix Pharmaceuticals continued to grow, its reputation not just as a research firm, but as a symbol of ethical leadership. The merger with Maddox had created stability for thousands of employees and access to better treatment for patients across the country. Claire had remained at the helm, but now she wasn't alone. Torres oversaw clinical strategy. Eleanor ran community outreach, and slowly, quietly, Claire began training a leadership team that could one day allow her to step back, not in defeat, but in fulfillment. She and David made no grand declarations, no social media posts or office romances, but he became a presence, trustworthy, constant, and always putting the twins' comfort first. On weekends, they hiked trails together. On weeknights, he helped with science projects. And once, when Lily had a nightmare, it was David who gently hummed her back to sleep while Claire watched from the hallway, tears in her eyes. There was no ceremony to mark the transition, no announcement that the storm had passed. But one night, as Claire tucked the twins in, Lily whispered, "Mom, are we happy now?" Claire paused, smiled. "Yes," she answered. "We are." Good. 2 months later, Claire stood in front of a group of graduate students at a quiet university in Vermont. The guest lecture was on pharmaceutical ethics, but her closing remarks deviated slightly. "What you build when no one believes in you," she said, "is often stronger than anything built with praise." She saw herself in a few of their eyes, hungry for purpose, cautious of betrayal, hopeful despite the odds. And as she stepped away from the podium, her phone buzzed. A photo, sent by Thomas, of the twins at their school's science fair. Leo standing proudly next to a crystal display. Lily presenting a solar system model that rotated with a tiny motor. They were beaming. Claire replied with a simple message. "They're everything. We did right by them. Let's keep doing it." She slipped the phone back into her bag, walked outside into the chilly dusk, and breathed in the clean air of a life rebuilt, not from bitterness, but from boldness, resilience, and the belief that the best stories don't end with revenge. They end with something stronger: peace, love, and legacy.